Chapter 13 of The River War. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain and is read by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. The River War by Winston Churchill. Chapter 13. The Grand Advance. All through the early months of the summer, the preparations for the final advance were steadily proceeding. A second British brigade was ordered to the Sudan. A new battery of howitzer artillery, the 37th, firing enormous shells charged with lyddite, was dispatched from England. 2 large 40-pounder guns were sent from Cairo. Another British Maxim battery of 4 guns was formed in Cairo from men of the Royal Irish Fusiliers. 3 new screw gunboats of the largest size and most formidable pattern had been passed over the indefatigable railway in sections, and were now launched on the clear waterway south of the Atbara encampment, and last but not least, the 21st Lancers. The author led a troop in this regiment during the final advance to Omdurman, and it is from this standpoint that the ensuing chapters are to some extent conceived. Were ordered up the Nile. Events now began to move rapidly. Within 3 weeks of the arrival of the reinforcements, the climax of the war was over. Within 5 weeks the British troops were returning home. There was no delay at the Atbara encampment. Even before the whole of the 2nd Brigade had arrived, some of its battalions were being dispatched to Wad Hamed, the new point of concentration. This place was a few miles north of Shabluka and only 58 miles from Omdurman. It was evident, therefore, that the decisive moment of the 3 years' war approached. The staff, the British infantry, 1 squadron, the guns, and the stores were carried south in steamers and barges. The Egyptian division marched to Wad Hamed by brigades. The horses of the batteries, the transport animals of the British division, about 1,400 in number, the chargers of the officers, some cattle, and most of the war correspondents were sent along the left bank of the river, escorted by 2 squadrons of the 21st Lancers and 2 Maxim guns. All the 13 squadrons of cavalry remained 3 days at Wad Hamed. After the fatigues of the march we were glad to have an opportunity of looking about, of visiting regiments known in other circumstances, and of writing a few letters. This last was the most important, for it was now known that after leaving Wad Hamed there would be no post or communication with Cairo and Europe until the action had been fought and all was over. The halt was welcome for another reason. The camp itself was well worth looking at. It lay lengthwise along the river bank, and was nearly 2 miles from end to end. The Nile secured it from attack towards the east. On the western and southern sides were strong lines of thorn bushes, staked down and forming a zeriba, and the north face was protected by a deep artificial watercourse, which allowed the waters of the river to make a considerable inundation. From the bank of this work the whole camp could be seen. Far away to the southward the white tents of the British division, a little nearer rows and rows of grass huts and blanket shelters, the bivouacs of the Egyptian and Sudanese brigades. The Sirdar's large white tent, with the red flag of Egypt flying from a high staff on a small eminence, and to the right the grove of palm trees in which the officers of the Egyptian cavalry had established themselves. The whole riverside was filled by a forest of masts. Crowds of gyassas, barges, and steamers were moored closely together, and while looking at the furled sails, the tangled riggings, and the tall funnels, it was easy for the spectator to imagine that this was the docks of some populous city in a well-developed and civilized land. But the significance of the picture grew when the mind, outstripping the eye, passed beyond the long, low heights of the gorge and cataract of Shabluka, and contemplated the ruins of Khartoum and the city of Omdurman. There were known to be at least 50,000 fighting men collected in their last stronghold. We might imagine the scene of excitement, rumour, and resolve in the threatened capital. The Khalifa declares that he will destroy the impudent invaders. The Mahdi has appeared to him in a dream. Countless angelic warriors will charge with those of Islam. The enemies of God will perish, and their bones will whiten the broad plain. Loud is the boasting, and many are the oaths which are taken, as to what treatment the infidel dogs shall have when they are come to the city walls. The streets swarm with men and resound with their voices. Everywhere is preparation and defiance. And yet over all hangs the dark shadow of fear. Nearer and nearer comes this great serpent of an army, moving so slowly and with such terrible deliberation, but always moving. A week ago it was 60 miles away. Now it is but 50. Next week only 20 miles will intervene, and then the creep of the serpent will cease, and without argument or parley, one way or the other, the end will come. The road to the next camp was a long one, for though Royan Island, opposite to which the site had been selected, was only 7 miles in the direct line, it was necessary to march 8 miles into the desert to avoid the Shabluka heights, and then to turn back to the Nile. The infantry were therefore provided with camel transport to carry sufficient water in small iron tanks for one night, and they were thus able to bivouac halfway, and to complete the journey on the next morning, thus making a 2 days' march. The mounted troops, who remained at Wad Hamed till all had gone south, were ordered to move on the 27th of August, and by a double march catch up the rest of the army. Wad Hamed then ceased for the time being to exist except in name. All the stores and transport were moved by land or water to the south of Shabluka, and an advanced base was formed upon Royan Island. Communications with the Atbara encampment and with Cairo were dropped, and the army carried with them in their boats sufficient supplies to last until after the capture of Omdurman, when the British division would be immediately sent back. It was calculated that the scope of this operation would not be greater than 3 weeks, and on the 27th the army were equipped with 21 days' supplies, of which 2 were carried by the troops, 5 by the regimental barges, and 14 in the army transport sailing vessels. All surplus stores were deposited at Royan Island, where a field hospital was also formed. The expeditionary force, which was thus concentrated, equipped, and supplied for the culminating movement of the River War, was organised as follows: Commander-in-Chief, the Sirdar. The British Division, Major General Gatacre commanding. 1st Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General Wauchope. 1st Battalion, Royal Warwickshire Regiment. 1st Battalion, Lincoln Regiment. 1st Battalion, Seaforth Highlanders. 1st Battalion, Cameron Highlanders. The 2nd Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General Littleton. 1st Battalion, Grenadier Guards. 1st Battalion, Northumberland Fusiliers. 2nd Battalion, Lancashire Fusiliers. 2nd Battalion, Rifle Brigade. The Egyptian Division, Major General Hunter commanding. 1st Brigade, commanded by Colonel MacDonald, consisting of the 2nd Egyptians, the 9th, 10th, and 11th Sudanese. 2nd Brigade, under Colonel Maxwell, consisting of the 8th Egyptians and the 12th, 13th, and 14th Sudanese. 3rd Brigade, under Colonel Lewis, with the 3rd Egyptians, the 4th, 7th, and 15th Egyptians. 4th Brigade, under Colonel Collinson, with the 1st Egyptians, half of the 5th Egyptians, the 17th and 18th Egyptians. Mounted Forces, the 21st Lancers, under Colonel Martin, with 4 squadrons. Camel Corps, under Major Tudway, with 8 companies. Egyptian Cavalry, under Colonel Broadwood, with 9 squadrons. Artillery, Colonel Long commanding. British, 32nd Field Battery, Royal Artillery, with 2 40-pound guns and a total of 8 guns. The 37th Field Battery, Royal Artillery, of 5-inch howitzers, with 6 guns. Egyptian Artillery, the Horse Battery of the Egyptian Army, composed of 6 Krupp guns. No. 1 Field Battery, composed of 6 Maxim Nordenfeldt guns. No. 2 Field Battery, consisting of 6 guns. No. 3 Field Battery, consisting of 6 guns. And No. 4 Field Battery, consisting of 6 guns. Machine guns. British, the detachment of the 16th Company of the Eastern Division Royal Artillery with 6 Maxim guns.